Why was Street Christopher with a dog's head? Icons of Christopher with a dog's head, together with some other controversial iconographic subjects, were officially forbidden by the Synod's order of 1722 as contrary to nature, history, and the truth itself. But it would be naive to assume that this figure appeared by mistake. This is the most mysterious of all the saints, and icons with his image are still in disgrace in the Church. They depict Street Christopher with a dog's head. This may seem blasphemous to some. But the Greeks, creating these icons, and did not think to desecrate the holy feelings. Just such people were described by Saint Andrew the Apostle after his missionary journey through the lands where the Pakistani-Iranian border is now located. Many references to the life of this unusual saint with the head of a dog can be found in church literature. According to them, Saint Christopher was so fierce that the Roman Emperor Decius Trajan, who ruled in the 250s, seeing him for the first time, fell from his throne out of fear. George Alexandrou, a Greek writer, while collecting facts about the life of Saint Andrew the Apostle, about whom he wrote the book, He Who Raised the Cross in the Ice, found many references to the cinocephals, a tribe to which Saint Christopher could have belonged. According to the writer, the Apostle Andrew traveled to the northeast of Pakistan. There he met people with unusual and even terrifying appearance. About these same tribes mentioned and traveler Marco Polo. It was he who called them cynocephals. Describing these creatures, he said that they resembled mastiff dogs. They supposedly achieved their frightening appearance by cutting their cheeks, sharpening their teeth and ears. For babies, they shrunk their skulls so that they became elongated. And all this in order to intimidate their enemies. There are different versions of how Christopher with a dog's head became a saint. Here's what the legend says. At the time of Emperor Decius Trajan, he was a warrior and robber of gigantic stature, bringing terror to all of Palestine. Christopher said that he would agree to serve someone who was more fearsome and powerful than he was. Then he realized that there was no one more terrible than the devil and decided to worship him. However, when he learned that the devil feared Jesus and fled from the sign of the cross, he left him and became a zealous servant of God, converting many people to Christianity. Attempting to baptize the people of Lycia, Christopher met fierce resistance and died. The Church honors him as a great martyr. True, in 1722, the Holy Synod decided not to draw Saint Christopher with a dog's head. However, there is no agreement on the birthplace of Saint Christopher among historians, both ancient and current. The medieval chronicler Paul the Deacon wrote that the Germanic tribe of the Lombards, which is famous for the First Crusades, had friendly relations with cynocephals. Why were the dog heads feared? It is said, as if, killing, they greedily fell to the wounds of enemies and drank blood. Researcher Adam Bremenskyi states the legend that cinocephals are children of Amazons, whose fathers were some unknown monsters who lived in the north. There are many legends about them, some of which the poet Nizami retold in the poem Iskandar Name. In it is told that Russian tribes, fighting with army Alexander Great, have let out in fight monster which torn off soldiers of the enemy hands and heads, and even the fighting elephant has torn off a trunk. The monster, according to Nizami, was no different from an ordinary tall man. He was distinguished from the general mass only by a horn on his forehead and enormous strength. Nizami calls the homeland of monsters the mountains on the way to eternal darkness, polar night. It is possible that this is the modern subpolar Urals. The north of Russia up to the 18th century was a reserve for creatures known to the rest of the world only by legends and myths. Nikolai Karamzin mentioned that the mysterious mountains on the ocean shore were the subject of conversation in Moscow in the 16th century. And among the inhabitants of the polar North, Muscovites mentioned people with dog heads. And the traveler Gerber Stein, who left his evidence in the Russian road book of the 17th century, wrote that in the upper reaches of the Ob River lived people with dog heads. In the 20th century, the Ob River was mentioned by the French philosopher René Guénon. In addition, witnesses who saw Seglovets called them inhabitants of the highlands. But these regions are also considered to be the habitat of Bigfoot. True, describing him, they say that he is more like an ape and, in particular, a baboon. And meanwhile pavians in Egypt were called cynocephals, that is Seglovets, because of the similarity of their heads with the heads of large dogs. So could the tribe from which Street Christopher came be a tribe of Sasquatches? But Christopher has another twin image, the Egyptian Anubis, the god of death and rebirth of all living things, in fact, the normal peasant god of spring. Anubis is also dog-headed, and most importantly, in his hands, just like Christopher's, is a blossoming staff. This is the victory of spring over winter, and of life over death, which all farmers observe every year. The grain, dry and dead, being buried in the damp earth, is resurrected in the same way as the staff of Anubis, or as the staff of Reprev, Ophiro, or Christopher. With the idea of the resurrection of Jesus, these allegories are extremely closely connected. It remains to find out what dogs have to do with it, and in Eurasia the answer cannot be found. The dog is tabooed by the largest religions as one of the guises of the unclean. The answer is preserved in the Aztecs. Dog from their point of view is an excellent guide to the other world, and while the soul flies out of the body trembling, not understanding what to do, the dog leads it exactly to the cave of ancestors. That is why the Indians always killed and put a dog in the burial. Here the common roots of cultures are particularly well seen. Under the guise of civilized Christopher lies a somewhat more ancient Charon, then even more ancient Anubis, and if you scratch more intensively, you will start to see the usual Indian dog, which was put in the grave of each departed parent. Something about righteous dogs. The sacred meaning of the dog was perfectly understood by all the real churches. Dominicans, Dominicanus, dogs of the Lord, tattooed on their wrists a dog's head with a torch in its teeth, so, at least, they believe, at least the patron saint of people with risky professions is the dog-headed Christopher.